Welcome to this Shape the Future Interreg online consultation workshop. We are doing this as part of a series of methods for doing a consultation. I will say a bit more about that, but first I will introduce myself. I'm Kirsti Meinheimer and I'm the head of secretariat for the Interreg NPA program. And with me today, I have three Interreg NPA colleagues: Annika Blomster from the Managing Authority, Kalle Pakkaleen, he's from the Joint Secretariat, and Lucia, she's the Zoom moderator, also from the Secretariat. And we also have one of our speakers here today, Irene McMaster from the European Policies Research Center. You will hear more from her later on. Today we have about 2 hours for the total session. I will first give you a bit of an introduction into why this consultation workshop, what is it about. Then we will have a keynote speech from John Bachler from the also from the European Policies Research Center. There's a video message from him with some interesting points about the discussions going on the future of Interreg. After that, Irene will set the scene, speaking about how the program has evolved through the years and what its contributions have been. And then the second part of the consultation workshop is the actual workshop. So we will have some parallel sessions where we will discuss a number of consultation questions. And after that, we will come back to the main group, and the people facilitating the discussions will give some highlights from discussions, and then we will hear what happens next with your input today. So this consultation is about, or is meant to provide input to the next generation of Interreg programs. So we're talking about 2028 to 2035. It feels far away, but the preparations of these programs takes a couple of years, and what is new or different from previous times that we've been in this process is that the European Commission has asked all the Interreg programs in Europe to consult with their stakeholders and with citizens in their program areas to provide input to this process. So this is a unique opportunity to be part of this Europe-wide dialogue, and this will influence the next regulations that will then decide how the new Interreg programs will look. So we are doing something similar. We have, as many other Interreg programs, we have an online survey, which is still open. But we also decided to do this consultation workshop, which is modeled on something we did when we designed the current program. We also had these workshops. It was also during COVID times. This was one reason why we did it online, but we met with projects in particular to discuss the future priorities of the program and got a lot of valuable input into making them easier to work with and easier to apply for. So we decided that it would be a good idea to come back to this format, discussing with a relatively small group of projects and applicants about their opinions and their ideas about the future Interreg programs. There will be a few other consultation moments still. Next week, we're meeting with lead partners from the recently approved fourth call projects, and we will do a small exercise with them. And then a number of regional contact points will also do their own mini consultations. So, and yeah, what will happen with all this input, Annika will tell you later in this workshop. But we would like to start by listening to Professor John Bachler, the director of the European Policies Research Center at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. And he was also a member of a high-level specialist group that the Commission gathered to talk about the future of the cohesion policy. So he has some special insights into the discussions going on about the future of Interreg, cohesion policy in general, Interreg as well. So I will start the video.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to participate in this conference. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you this afternoon for an excellent debate on shaping the future. I do have a strong personal commitment to Interreg and particularly the NPA programme. My involvement goes back to the Scottish Nordic cooperation in the early 1990s, which laid the groundwork for the first Northern Periphery Interreg programme. I'm very glad, though, that my vastly experienced colleague, Dr. Irene McMaster, is able to be with you personally as she leads the European Territorial Cooperation Programme at the European Policy Research Centre. And Irene has been involved in both programming and evaluation of the NPP and the NPA, as I'm sure many of you know. This event is taking place at a crucial time. The discussions in Brussels and among member states, as I'm sure you know, will potentially lead to the biggest reform of the multi-annual financial framework, the funding for cohesion, and the expectations of cohesion policy since the 1988 reform. So there may be big changes ahead. Of course, there's a lot we still don't know. We don't yet know basic things like the configuration of the new college, the Commissioner for Regional Policy, and whether the institutional responsibilities for cohesion policy will be merged with other portfolios. But we do have some indications of policy directions from the political guidelines set out by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Now, she set out 3 aims for the next MFF, which she said needs to be more focused, to align with EU priorities and objectives, targeted to where EU action is most needed in a flexible way. She says she wants a policy-based budget, not a program-based budget. Secondly, she said that the MFF needs to be simpler in the way that it works, with fewer programs and a plan for each country, linking key reforms with investment and focusing on joint priorities, including promoting economic, social and territorial cohesion. And thirdly, she said that the next MFF needs to be more impactful, notably with a European Competitiveness Fund and better use of the EU budget to leverage national, private and institutional financing. For those of us with an interest in cohesion, we should note that the Commission President also said that her approach, and I quote, means ensuring that every region in every part of Europe is supported, that no one is left behind. She said that she is committed to a strong cohesion policy designed together with regions and local authorities. Now, that commitment is at least somewhat reassuring. I say somewhat. It does reflect the importance of the territorial challenges which we set out in the high-level group report on the future of cohesion policy, and which were set out in the 9th cohesion report. We should also note that the report by Enrico Letta on the single market emphasised that cohesion is a necessary accompaniment to European integration. So cohesion is a necessary accompaniment to European integration. Having said that, the recent Draghi report on EU competitiveness sees cohesion very much as needing to be aligned with the competitiveness agenda. It really didn't have much to say about cohesion, apart from the implication that funding for cohesion and the cap needs to be reallocated. So what of Interreg in this evolving future agenda? Well, there are some positives about the importance of interregional and cross-border cooperation in the reports that I've just mentioned. In particular, there is agreement that we need to encourage regions to be outward-looking, to build partnerships with other regions, and to develop more networks for knowledge exchange, and especially between more advanced and more vulnerable regions. The Draghi report, for example, cited examples such as innovation valleys as a way forward. So against this background, let me highlight a few questions for you to consider today. There are, of course, many, many questions, but let me highlight three of these. The first is, how can the NPA contribute to strategic EU priorities in the future, improving the competitiveness of the EU in areas like innovation, productivity, the green and digital transitions, energy security, and managing demographic change. A second question is how the NPA can contribute to the major territorial challenges which are highlighted in the high-level group report and the 9th cohesion report. Several regions in the NPA area have been identified as being at risk of development traps, not as significantly so as other parts of Western Europe, but nevertheless at some risk. There are also issues about migration and demographic change. But of course, there are also opportunities for innovation, as NPA projects have shown so well over the past years. And the third question is, how can the experience of the NPA, along with other Interreg programs, contribute to helping regions adapt to the crises caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, especially along the border where the NPA is in the front line? And more broadly, as we look at enlargement of the EU, how can the lessons of successful intervention under the NPA inform the work being done to prepare candidate countries for accession? So some meaty, weighty questions. There are, of course, many others, but I hope this has provided some useful context for your debate. I wish you well and look forward to hearing about the discussions. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
So some interesting discussion points here brought by Professor John Packler, and following on this will be Dr. Irene McMaster from the same institution, and Irene has specialized really in Interreg over the past many years. I won't go into how many years, Irene, but I will manage your slides, and please feel free to start your presentation to set the scene for our discussions.
Cool. Yep. Thanks very much. Yeah, I've been at EPRC for almost 25 years, and the NPA and previous NPP programs have been sort of formally going as Interreg programs for 25 years. So we've kind of grown up together, and I've spent quite a lot of my time working on this program and the sort of wider territory across the Northern Periphery and in the Arctic. So similar to John, sort of definitely personal interest as well as professional. You heard a bit from John there about sort of this picture going forward, and to be honest, it's kind of slightly daunting when you kind of think about the scale of some of the debates that are going on at the moment, and it is quite an uncertain period in many ways. But often going into these kind of periods, it's quite useful to do a look back and see where you've come from and what strengths there are to carry forward. So that's what I was going to focus on in this brief presentation. The first slide after this introductory slide here shows the wider context overall in Interreg land, where you can see Interreg is now 30 plus years old as a series of programs that have been run by the Commission and member states and regions. It's grown up and evolved over that time, moving from being a sort of community initiative, which was sort of outside of the main frameworks of cohesion policy. At its inception, Interreg was very much focused just on direct cross-border cooperation, building networks, and sort of soft cooperation. It's almost a sort of getting to know you sort of stage. And it was also a big focus as well on particularly spatial planning, as opposed to really delivering very tangible results on the ground. It had a pretty small budget at the time, and the EU has grown over the period, and when it first started, it was just covering 11 participating member states. It's now a kind of central pillar of cohesion policy, covering all member states in the EU, but also more widely. Applicant countries, countries wanting to join the EU, non-member states, and even when you look down in the Mediterranean, there's North African countries that are part of Interreg programs. So it's big in terms of where it covers. It's also big in terms of what it covers, in terms of themes and areas of activity. And through the programs that are now in place, Interreg programs are delivering some very innovative and sort of substantial results. And it's obviously operating now with a bigger budget of about sort of 10 billion for the current programming period, sort of 9-10 billion. But when you look at it, it's also worth bearing in mind the wider cohesion policy situation that it's in. It's still in some ways the kind of baby of the family, where it's the younger sibling. It has to fight for its place when it comes up to these big budget negotiations on the financial frameworks, and it has to shout quite loudly about what it's done and what it's doing to get people to sort of really pay attention. So while it has grown up, it's much more it's built into the cohesion policy networks and things. There is still that sort of case to be made for it. Similarly, in the next slide, the Northern Periphery Programme, as I first knew it, and the Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme as it came to be, has also grown and evolved substantially over a period going beyond the 25 years of it being a formal Interreg programme. It started, as John mentioned, as a kind of ad hoc, almost informal arrangement between the Scottish and Nordic partners, focusing on exchanges and sort of knowledge exchange around regional economic development and cohesion policy. And that was linked to Sweden, Finland, and even though they didn't join, Norway's application to the EU. And that went really well. It was very productive, and there were some really good institutional and personal sort of networks came from that. And gradually over time, that kind of solidified and became this programme that we now know, which has been running formally as an Interreg programme for 25 years. And it's a well-established programme, it's well run, it delivers sort of impactful projects that very directly engage with communities on the ground and specific development challenges in the Northern Periphery and Arctic programme. And at the same time, it's got this element where it connects on to major strategic initiatives and sort of wider debates about the development in these sort of sparsely populated and Arctic territories and areas. So there has been a lot of continuity and a sort of positive evolution. As I've said, it's gone from sort of quite loose discussions and knowledge exchange to really delivering results. I remember way back at the beginning when you were trying to come up with examples of good tangible projects that showed what Interreg could really do. There was a series of NPA projects called RODEX, which was a sort of technology-based thing based on sort of building roads over sort of very swampy ground. And that was really the go-to project. And now there's so many projects that are delivering really interesting results. You're kind of spoiled for choice. So yeah, there's been a lot of change, and there has throughout this period been this very solid focus on the needs of remote and sparsely populated areas. The programme has grown to include new members. Its focus has gradually evolved, covering new issues and themes, but that strand has run through right from the very beginning and has held the programme together in a very sort of cohesive and coherent way, even though it's covering a very large geographic area. Having said all of that, in the next slide, as well as sort of continuity, there's also been an absolutely enormous amount of change in the period that the programme has been running. But within that, something that the programme, I think, over its various iterations has been able to do is respond and adapt to these very substantial changes. As I said, the programme had its origins in EU enlargement, but it's also faced contraction through Brexit and Scotland and Northern Ireland not being part formally of the programme area anymore. And through that sort of loss of very, I think, productive links with partners in those areas, although there have been ways that some projects have kind of kept in touch, as it were. There have, when it first started, the big focus was cold climate as a unifying feature. Now all the talk about is global warming. Although cold climate in the summer in Scotland, it was still there, but the global warming, cold climate has been a change. The programme went through a period, a substantial period of enjoying significant warming relations to the east, and put a lot of work and effort into building links with partners in regions in Russia, and obviously those links have been very dramatically cut, which has raised new development issues where in the past there were sort of opportunities. Also in the past, there was this sort of very strong focus, which remains, on remoteness, the impact of very large physical distances between places and core centres of development. But digital technology means, these distances are being spanned in new ways, and connectivity is much more of a focus. And also in the past, outmigration was really one of the only stories in town, but now in some areas, inward migration and population change is another sort of development issue that has sort of come to the fore. So there's quite a complex mix, and a lot of change has been going on. But as I said, in relation to the previous slide, the programme's focus on peripherality, people, communities, and the value of cooperation in addressing all of these issues has been sort of remained central and continues to be important. Again, as John was saying in the debates, this focus on cooperation is still very much there. Entering into the reform periods, the next slide focuses particularly on added value, and going into reform periods, trying to sort of make yourselves stand out and justifying this sort of Interreg activity is always sort of at the heart of discussions and dialogues, and it's something that we've worked on quite a lot at EPRC in the past, sort of really trying to identify what working on this sort of transnational cooperation, collaborative basis adds to what could be done just by partners or areas working alone. In particular, what the NPA and sort of maybe Interreg more generally has done is, by working on the sort of 7-year planning and programming framework, provided that sort of predictable, durable, strategic umbrella, that these kind of activities, which can take quite a long time sometimes to get partnerships together, get things up and running, and then sort of learn the process of delivering results and turning discussions into actions and that sort of thing. By having that sort of broad umbrella and also base of experience to draw on, the territorial cooperation programs in NPA in particular provide a sort of important strategic vision and strategic framework to work within. They can also be very valuable in terms of helping sort of join the dots a little bit from communities that are quite remote, sparsely populated, isolated, and big strategic initiatives that can sometimes be applied sort of across an area and sort of helping sort of build those links and bridges. The sort of specific territorial focus that the programme area has, as I've said numerous times already, the remote, sparsely populated area element, and being able to link up regions that have that as a common concern, and sometimes it isn't a concern that's picked up domestically within their own countries, or it isn't always the kind of primary focus, can be very valuable and a really strong basis for sort of exchanges and developing joint initiatives. Another area where Interreg as a whole, but this programme in particular, has been very important in supporting is innovative sort of solutions. You always get sort of more innovative and thoughtful and new ideas when you're sort of bouncing ideas around between partners. Also, the scale of Interreg in terms of budgets. I did kind of say it's kind of the small partner in the cohesion policy family, but sometimes working with not huge budgets allows you to maybe try new things, or if you're just part of a bigger project, it allows you to sort of push on with an idea that you wouldn't want to take all the risk on yourself. But if that risk is or idea is something you're prepared to try out as part of a group, there can be important opportunities to give something a go that you wouldn't have been able to try or test out yourself. The networks that have evolved over successive now programming periods have become very sort of durable and lasting as well. We've done evaluation work on this program, which doesn't just look at one programming period, but has looked back at others. And you can see how links and connections have evolved and gone on to not just continue to work in the NPA, but led to other productive links. And that particularly building of critical mass to act on something has been an important part of the work that the Northern Periphery Programme has done. And also, as well as the sort of innovation element, there's also the sort of very much linked to that, the forward-looking perspective, where it's catching new trends, new themes, new ideas, which maybe aren't mainstream policy yet in either a regional, a national, or EU context, sort of working in new areas. Like, I remember in the past there have been sort of many interesting projects involving things like the circular economy and things like that. They maybe didn't know they were working on the circular economy at the time, but then circular economy became very mainstream, and you're like, oh, there was a Northern Periphery project ages ago that did something like that. So it's that sort of pushing boundaries has been quite successful in Interreg projects. And from sometimes another element that can get missed is, and we are certainly very aware of, with me being based in Scotland, is the value of the sort of wider territorial networks and links that Interreg can give, not just the local communities and the regional level, but also this a sort of more national level. And I think sometimes that can get missed where domestic governments are sort of focused very much on the connections that they have through formal ministerial links and so on, and that sort of regional level connectivity can sometimes get overlooked. So overall, Interreg is now in its 30s. The NPA program is coming into its late 20s. I had a look at some self-help web pages about managing your 30s, and there were some relevant points that I thought I could maybe share. That the program is, and you're wiser and more mature, obviously. There's such a wealth of experience that it can draw on going on to this new period. But obviously at this age and stage, you're not too old to try new things. But coming with that, there is also more of an idea of what you do and what you do well, and sometimes that focusing on what you do well and sort of having to narrow things can be part of the picture. And there are also just those other additional key points about moisturising, securing your pension and work out more, but that's possibly not so relevant for this particular discussion. But hopefully that little bit of sort of a broad view of where the programme started and where it has come to now will hopefully help sort of inform discussions, and it would be interesting to follow up on any questions that anybody had, either on John's presentation or this one. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this, also for the self-help tips at the end. At this stage, I don't know if there's any questions about, we have just a few minutes, but a few minutes before we go into the next part of the session, if anybody has any questions to Irene. See any hands?
I should also say, I noticed John recorded his message before they announced the new commission, and he mentioned that we didn't know who the commissioners were and things, but there is a commissioner that has cohesion attached to his job title, which was a small glimmer of hope in the debates, which was nice. But yeah, just a small update on his presentation. That communities link has been so strong from the get-go, and as you said, some of the other Interreg programs have kind of blown a bit with the policy wind, sort of picking up on oh, we need to fund, as you say, green digital or whatever. And I can see that strength having in part come from the fact that the NPA program was the result of a sort of, it was a result of an enthusiasm rather than from the bottom up, rather than a top down, somebody's drawn something on a map and gone, yeah, we don't have a program here, we'll just make one up kind of thing. It had this sort of a natural birth, as it were, where it sort of grew up from this exchange of experience network and sort of shared territorial interest. And I think working to retain that focus in the next programming period is key. And hopefully, I don't think it'll be too difficult, because in previous program periods, a lot of the wording around what Interreg programs should be or what the priorities are has changed, but there's always been this coat hanger you can hang all these different themes on, where it's sort of green transition in remote and sparsely populated areas, or digital transition in and there's always had this kind of common point to come back to. And I think in some other programs that's been a bit more difficult, particularly the big transnational programs sometimes can struggle a bit with exactly how to pull themselves together, but that's never really been an issue so much for the NPA. And I think hopefully, no matter what the wording of what cohesion policy is or will become, the Northern Periphery core will still be there, but it's absolutely central to mobilising partners and sort of, yeah, having people round the table, having that sort of key point to come together on. And yes, it would be more if the UK had stayed in, but because that was a big dip. But then Ireland expanded its area and contribution, which is important to note. But the other thing on the chart about member states, I sort of counted Scotland, and that was sort of participating states in the programme rather than sort of official member states. And within, obviously, the NPA, you've got non-member states who they decide their contributions on an annual basis. So it can be quite difficult to predict what will come from them. But the budget as well is also kind of reflective a bit of the population as well. And so there is a trend for, in previous budget negotiations, for the Commission to come out and say, we need a huge amount of money for Interreg, and they know that during negotiations on the various budget headings, the Interreg budget will get chipped away to make Greece happy with its sort of agriculture budget, or make Germany happy about something else. And it's quite often a little tool that gets money taken from it to keep other people happy. But I think the wider sort of concern or issue now is what budget will remain for cohesion policy overall. Because, as John was saying, there are these sort of wider sort of big debates about where competitiveness fits and where cohesion comes in, and how much weighting those are given. And there's so many competing priorities, particularly at a time when budgets are under so much pressure, and national governments are under a lot of pressure as well, to, linked to more sceptical voting about sort of EU parties and things like that. So it's really, really difficult to guess at this point, when they haven't even kind of set a ballpark figure for cohesion policy. But on the upside, again, as John said, while the whole of cohesion policy is up for debate, I really think the bit that kind of stands apart and stands out is now Interreg. It's the one bit of cohesion policy that has this sort of very clear added value to be done at EU level, and for the EU to be involved in and delivering, along with regions and territories. Whereas cohesion policy, it's, could you do it at member state level and get similar results? That's sort of a separate debate. But Interreg in some ways is kind of hopefully apart from that. And as again he was saying, throughout all of this sort of inputs, cooperation keeps on coming up. So again, I'm kind of taking that as some hope. But yeah, and you never know. Scotland Northern Ireland might be able to get our act together and come back in some way and bring some money with us. So we live in hope. So yeah.
Thank you, Irene,
Yeah.
for answering that quite tricky question. I think
Yeah.
you covered all the eventualities. No, and also, I mean, we knew, for example, between the past period and this period, we were shrinking, but still, I think, not to put it in a negative way, but we're quite cheap. We can get a lot done with little money. It's the magic of this program is not in the amount of funding. I think it's in it's very clear focus on remote and sparsely populated communities and on all the connections that we've built over the years. Not to say that I don't hope that, you know, this will not be, you know, at least maintained and grown a little bit, but it's up to the member states to decide how much.
Yeah, good value and added value. That's sort of,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
good,
this
good
is for
mantra.
us to prove.
Yes.
Good. We have to, the schedule is a little bit tight for our discussion. So I'm just going to move on to Kalle to take us to the instructions for the parallel sessions that will be coming up very soon. So thank you, Kalle.
Good afternoon, everyone, on my behalf as well. And thank you for taking the time to join us today to this very engaging and productive workshop, hopefully. So we've gathered together yourselves, a diverse group of minds, and each with a unique experience and insight and perspectives. And that's exactly what makes the workshop special and valuable. And we're preparing the next programming period. So our aim today is to create a space where we can openly share ideas, discuss the challenges and the future direction of the NPA program. So you are a part of a very exciting process and discussion here today. It's a collaborative environment where where every contribution is valued, no matter how big or small. So feel free to speak up and ask questions and express your thoughts in the sessions to come. We have a lot to cover in a short time, but we'll try to keep the pace comfortable. So let's keep the atmosphere light and enjoyable, knowing that collaboration works best when we're having fun. So let's do just that. Okay, so next. We've pre-divided you all into 3 groups. You will be invited to join a breakout room, and on Zoom there will be a prompt asking you to enter a breakout session. So click on that when it soon appears on your screen. Today you will discuss 3 consultation topics with each other, and these topics will be introduced to you by our moderators in 3 different sessions. Each topic has a dedicated facilitator, one of us, myself, Kirsti Meinheimer and Annika Blomster. And the discussions will take 20 minutes each. The facilitators will rotate between the rooms when the session ends, but you will stay put in the same room and add to the discussion and topic of the previous group in your following session. So this should allow you to go deeper in the next session and the sessions that change and the new sessions coming up. After the 3 sessions, you will be invited back to this main room in which the facilitators will share the highlights from today's discussions.
Thank you very much and welcome back, everybody. I think we had some really interesting discussions, just speaking for my own topic, but the idea is that each of us now will mention, each of us facilitators will mention something from our discussions. We won't be able to go into a lot of detail because we only have a few minutes left. But maybe Kalle, could I ask you to say something about the discussions in your room?
Yes, I think among the 2 questions, there were maybe something clearly that sticked out. If I go to the first question related to the potential cooperation topics that are not sufficiently addressed in the current program that would like to see in the future, I think one thing had to do with generations. So was seen that there's a lot of focus on youth, but also we should equally look more, or we should look more also into elderly people and the gray economy issues, and providing services, using technology to provide better services for healthcare. And this is certainly an issue with the aging population. Security issues were raised, so related to biodiversity, but also the economy, such as tourism and changing tourism patterns, what that might look like in the future, and the Arctic tensions, and how that affects the communities. As an example, the expansion of NATO, and how, well, what kind of effect that would have on the communities. And then the sharing of the natural resources was maybe the third one. So preserving the nature, preserving the very sensitive nature of the Northern Periphery and Arctic, and maybe finding new technologies in doing that better. And there were some concerns related to mining and deep sea mining and industries such as that. The second question: what have been the most impactful pilot projects or new ideas your organization would not have been able to participate in without the NPA support? I think there was a lot about testing new ideas and capacity building and learning transnationally. There was also one very interesting point raised out, I think, something about piloting currently more marginal sectors or topics, but combining with other regions that would give more critical mass to them. So that was something that is maybe not possible through other funding sources, but piloting something that is now maybe more marginal, but in the future it could be totally different. And balancing the gap between other EU regions and keeping up with other more central regions. So the regional development factor still seems to be an important thing.
Thank you very much, Kalle. Annika.
Yes, thank you. So the theme for discussions that I had with the three different groups was how how the program to an even larger extent could target real needs in the region was one thing. And something that's stuck out here is that there was a lot of discussion on the difficulties to attract the actors on the ground, because these are small stakeholders, small organizations, and it's difficult to develop relations with these because the lack of time and resources they face. So some solutions that were suggested were preparatory projects and lump sums, which have been viewed as very, very good and flexible solutions for these small actors to be able to use. It was also mentioned in regards to flexibility that the program period is so long, so there should be flexibility to adapt so that the real needs at that time could be addressed. And some solutions also that were suggested were workshops, both on regional level to in like the annual events that are arranged in each country, but more often, and also to have these types of workshops with NPA stakeholders to find out about the real needs when defining the program. And then the second question we discussed was how could the program better support capacity building? And also here, a lot, the word that was heard a lot was flexibility. Maybe the flexibility to include partners and increase budgets in projects after approval. The networking was also mentioned as a way to increase capacity, give support within the partnership to those actors that might not be so experienced. And also it was mentioned capacity building grants for how to prepare projects. So those were the main traits from the discussions.
Thank you. We're going a little bit over time, but I hope that everybody has a few more minutes left if they want to hear the outcome at least. So I discussed the wishes for the future, and the first topic was about how the program can help to better prepare partner organizations for cooperation. And there were many suggestions, but I think the ones that stuck out to me were some kind of mentoring of new applicants by existing or more experienced projects or partners, and also different types of events to help with networking and also partner search. So in-person events, such as annual events and other things that we've done are helpful, but also maybe online thematic events, so you can meet counterparts in other countries that are working in a similar field. And also one suggestion I liked was to have regional champions from experienced partner organizations to share with other less experienced organizations in the region what it is like to apply for funding, how to navigate things, how to get match funding, etc. The second question was, if you could add a new feature to the program, what would it be? And different things were mentioned, more sort of on the functioning, maybe project idea template, or also this thing about flexibility, the possibility to add new emerging topics to the program during the program period was mentioned. Maybe focus less on just the economic side, but also on things like more the social economic side, quality of life, resilience. Then the question was if the program should, in the future, allow small-scale infrastructure investments, and the answer was maybe small-scale infrastructure investments or informing infrastructure development, so not directly investing in it, but having projects around infrastructure that could help the development of the infrastructure. And one thing that I also liked was maybe in order to make the outcome of existing projects more successful, to have a parallel or one after the other, a post-project sort of policy development project, so that the policies are there to implement the results of the projects that have been funded. So that was something that was interesting. So yes, we will digest the input from the sessions a bit further and get back to you with what came out of it. But I think this was very useful. So maybe Annika, you could end by saying something about what happens next.
Yes, I'm very aware that we are running over time. So just very briefly, now during the coming weeks, September, October, we will be collecting materials from the online questionnaire still, which is out there. And I encourage all of you to go and respond to this if you haven't already. We have some events. We have a lead partner event next week where we will also run a consultation exercise. And there are also some national events by our regional contact points that will take place. So if you see them promoting something, please do take the chance to participate. In November, the preliminary findings of what we have come up with so far will be presented at an harvesting event, which is arranged by the European Commission. And then in December, we will present the report to our monitoring committee, the Northern Periphery and Arctic Monitoring Committee members. And then end of 24, by December 31st, we have a deadline to send something called the harvesting report to the European Commission with our input from the NPA. And the findings from the Interreg community will be presented by the Commission in March 25 or during the spring 25. It will be made public. There will be a big conference where all Interreg programs will produce one report. So there will be basically 86 of these reports saying what our stakeholders want to see in the future. And this will be presented at this Interreg Go conference in March and then shared widely. And all of this leads up to July 2025, when the multi-annual financial framework is to be proposed. And this is, of course, what sets the scene for the future cohesion policy. And we will, by doing these exercises, by producing these reports, be a small part of influencing the multi-annual financial framework and what it will say about territorial cooperation, about Interreg. So do take the chance to participate in the consultations ahead and the survey. And thank you for taking part in today's event. This will be part of the report that we will be compiling. Thank you.
Yes, so that concludes our events. I will also say maybe just in general, after the MFF is just to say the next steps after that, after the MFF is launched, that's when the real process starts for the different programs to start developing the next program. And no doubt then we will get back to stakeholders and more specifically work on ideas about what are the needs and how to develop the priorities of the new program. But we will come back to this. It was more a sort of a pre-process to feed into the regulation. So yeah, but it's anyway very good to hear from everybody, and some ideas you can already take on board maybe in the current program. Very good. Thank you very much.
I could just say that I said in one of the groups, we are, by area, we are the largest program, I think, Interreg program. I hope we continue to be the largest. We have the smallest budget out of all Interreg programs, and I hope that could change maybe in the future, but that's still to be seen. We're large but small, efficient.
Indeed, and thank you very much, Irene, as well, for your very good overview of how the program came to be where we are today, basically. Short. Good. Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day.